Hello, welcome to Brics Part 46. And the following research and media are for research purposes because we're trying to understand the relation of Brics and World War III and the financial collapse and other things and alliances. I think we've uncovered a heck of a lot. So, let's get back into it. Alright. So, we left off last time with the current US and Iranian relations. Now, remember, this is about 2004-ish. So, right here, it seems like at this moment, the United States persuaded China that providing Iran or Syria with missile or nuclear weapons wasn't good for the United States and Chinese relations. So yeah, it broke its commitment to certain things and also suspended its nuclear energy cooperation agreement with Iran. So, hold on, I'm reading a little bit. Okay, so worsening U.S.-Iranian relations may have basically an odd effect on the United States, Chinese, and U.S.-Russian relations. And the EU members will have to decide which new subcontraction missions serve their best interests and which are too risky to undertake. So the tensions between the United States and Iran may pose an obstacle to extensive cooperation between Iranian and Central Asia, as these countries may be wary of incurring U.S. cooperation, or as these countries may be wary of incurring U.S. disapproval. So in the 90s, the U.S. put severe restrictions on economic cooperation with Iran, and this came with the Iranian Non-Proliferation Act passed by Congress, followed by the Iranian-Libya Sanctions Act on August 5th of 1996. So these acts prohibit investments in Iran's energy sector. So a lot of this even extends before 9/11, but could it have been pointed to the upcoming 2001 situation that happened? Well, I think the United States created that whole situation, but this could have been a prelude to that creation. I'm reading. So during this time, Iran had a split state personality in society. By It condemned the 9/11 attacks, but also condemned the U.S. bombing operations in Afghanistan. Okay, and the tension between the United States and Iran escalated or got worse with Bush's January 2002 State of the Union address, which he characterized Iran as belonging to the axis of evil alongside the U.S. former ally Iraq and North Korea. I'm reading. So, the U.S. accused Iran of continuing to arm warlords. I'm drinking coffee. As you can see, I can't really pronounce some of these names, so I'll let you see for yourself. So until recently, these groups were united in the Afghan Northern Alliance and a complex of various non-Pushtun rebel movements. I have no idea what that means. So, and Iran and Russia previously supported the Northern Alliance and its fight against the, it's a Pashtun, against the Pashtun-dominated Taliban. On August 8, 1998, Taliban guards in the city of Mazar-i-Sharif in Afghanistan killed 11 Iranians, 10 diplomats, and 1 journalist. Iran and the Taliban thus were not cooperating. Okay, so, and according to the U.S., members of Iranian regime, the right faction and Hezbollah factions, did have contacts with the Taliban and its supporters long before the 9/11 attacks. The 9/11 issue I'm going to cover in my novel, because that was some shit. I'll tell you that much. You're not told the truth about 9/11. Okay, the Egyptian-based Al-Jihad is alleged to be in contact with segments of the Iranian government. According to an Insight magazine report during the 1990s, Al-Zawahiri, head of Al-Jihad, was believed to be the second person behind Osama bin Laden, and repeatedly traveled to Iran on the invitation of the Minister of Intelligence and Security, Ali Fahani. I'm not good at pronouncing these names. Sorry. So this guy, according to reports, is the commander of COD Force, a special operations unit conducting foreign terrorist operations. So, according to U.S. and European intelligence reports following the September 11th attacks, members of Al-Jihad traveled through the Iranian city of Mashhad to join Osama bin Laden's forces in Afghanistan. Okay, so another reason for Bush's access of evil speech was Israel's seizure of that Korane, a ship loaded with arms, on January 3rd, 2002. Israel stated that these arms originally came from Iran and were intended for the Palestinian Authority. Officials involved in the Afghan peace process asserted that Iran's foreign policy has changed from an ideology of revolutionary Islam to a more pragmatic approach that is motivated by national interest. Okay, now, where are we at time-wise? Thinking about finishing this today. So let's move on to current U.S.-Turkish relations during the time of around 2004, 2003. Okay. So there's much U.S. support for its ally Turkey and for Turkey's policies in the CEA. However, Turkish initially refused to allow the United States to open a second front in Iraq through Turkey, which gave both allies food for thought about the future of their relationship. When the United States acquires new bases close to the Black Sea, its military operations will be able to bypass Turkey. And the United States has urged Turkey to fill the vacuum in the region since the disintegration of the Soviet Union, and may still think that Turkey could serve as a counterweight to Russian and Iranian influence there. So, the United States and Turkey share these following objectives: to prevent Russia from regaining dominance over the CEA, which kind of seems like that's failing. Turkey is punished by the U.S. for its defiance, and the U.S. fails in Iraq to prevent Kurds from carving out a proto-state. U.S.-Turkey relations will deteriorate. In those circumstances, Turkey may move closer to Russia. So the other thing is to bring under control ethnic conflicts in Georgia, Chechnya, and Nagorno-Karabakh. I'm not good at pronouncing those names. So, and to support Turkey's desire to join the EU, and to support the BTC oil pipeline running through Turkey instead of Russia and Iran. Okay. Turkey's reasserting itself as a major actor in the region could become problematic for the United States. The Turkish refusal to provide transit rights for the United States military forces deployment to the Second Front in Iraq highlights the potential for diverging interest. Turkey and Iran, fueled by dangers of Azeri separatism, are competitors. The conflict between the Azerbaijan and Armenia and the clash of rival Islamic and Turkish secularist ideologies could result in proxy wars between Turkey and Iran and the Trans-Caucasus. Okay, now we're moving to the European Union and the CEA. Okay. EU authorities fear a fast-track depletion of Northern Sea oil deposits. That fear seems to be correct. So, consequently, diversifying to secure supplies in their own agenda, reflecting the need for a long-term EU common energy policy. The EU imports about 90% of its total oil consumption and 40% of its gas consumption. Up to 40% of EU's gas imports currently come and will continue to come from Russia. Okay. So the EU has a dependence and an oil and gas dependence, especially to OPEC during this time. So we're reading. So the EU at this time is looking at alternatives. Yeah, and we do see EU kind of failing in this. Okay, but the EU has a different policy from the United States with regard to Iran and does not incur Russian suspicion with regard to its eastward expansion. See, they were already worried about Russian expansion back then, so they kind of knew a lot of this was coming, but it seems like they didn't communicate that well to the public. Okay, I'm back to reading. basically, we're talking about trade agreements. And other organizations and interests that Europe has in the CEA, which is Central East Asia. Okay, so the collapse of the Soviet Union right here, however, made the creation of such a policy more, not less, urgent, in particular the relations between France and Germany. At a special European Council meeting in Dublin, June of 1990, these people proposed in a joint initiative to develop a common European foreign and security policy. Okay. Okay, so we need to point out to two developments in these policy areas. The first is the struggle for primary. Who will control the policy? States, as members of the EU in particular, those among the big three, or the EU as an organization of a democratically governed political community of the peoples of Europe. The second is the outcome that struggle in terms of creation of military force at the EU level capable of projecting military power into the CEA region and the political control of such a force. So, okay, so this is a follow-up to the Treaty on European Union mentioned above. Members of the Western European Union, which can operate outside of Europe, that kind of confuses me, decided in 1992 to implement peacekeeping and humanitarian operations. Okay. So, and in the 1996 NATO summit in Berlin, an agreement was reached that the United States allowed the Western EU to use in such operations NATO's military capacity and planning, which the United States could veto. The European deputy of NATO's SACEUR would be responsible for the conduct of military operations, whereas the Western European Union would be responsible for political strategy. Okay, so the EU was building a rapid reaction force of 60,000 military personnel, including Navy and Air Forces, for peacekeeping operations, so-called Petersburg Task was instituted as a permanent body of the Union. This force should be able to operate outside NATO. However, the Rapid Reaction Force is not a standing European army under EU command, but it may be one. That sounds confusing. EU members have to assign military forces to the Rapid Reaction Force, the model of intergovernmental decision-making has been maintained. Crisis management has been added to its mission. Okay. Reading down. Okay. They were trying to improve the defense capacity of Europe too. Here's the big question, especially with the war coming on. Will America ever find a united Europe prepared to join in its global Redeemer mission? The coalition of the willing is more likely outcome. Though the European Union may soon have a ready force of its own for peacekeeping and crisis management, the EU as a whole does not have a comprehensive policy agenda for safeguarding its interests in the CEA region. Okay. France is, we're right here now. France is more oriented towards North Africa. And for people to understand that, the main reason why France is more oriented towards North Africa had to do with Libya at one time was basically called New France. So France does have a heavy influence in the North African region. So Germany is mostly towards Eastern Europe and Britain towards the Baltic states. Apart from some significant investments by the French, France has not been a major player in the CEA. But France has also provided Georgia with equipment and supplies for a military hospital worth about $2 million in the United States. So Germany has been more preoccupied with transition in Eastern Europe, probably dealing with the fall of the Soviet Union. So Germany's activities in the CEA are mainly based on education and advice. Okay. In 1990, Germany exported many weapons belonging to the former East German Army to Turkey. Turkey has probably re-exported some of the weapons and used them in its support for Azerbaijan and whatever conflict with Armenia. During the period between 1991 and 1994, Germany exported 9,000 former East German Army tanks to Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan, and a coastal patrol boat to Georgia. That's interesting. Out of all that, and then you put that. Okay. And Britain has focused special attention to the Baltic states. Let's see here. Yeah, let's see if there's anything important in this. Okay, so Britain, like France, it provides little military assistance to the CEA. It's mostly through NATO-sponsored educational programs. For example, the War Studies programs at King's College in London has run a special one-year master's program for civilians working in the Ministries of Defense in one of the former Soviet republics, and a British general is head of the International Security Advisory Board in Georgia. Well, ain't that interesting? The influence continues the more you connect the dots. Okay, is this the last part? Okay. So, how long have we been going? We're finishing this out so I can wrap. I'm going to be wrapping Brics up. Not next Monday, but the Monday after that, and then we're going to go into something different. Okay, so the increasing involvement in the US and the EU, the conflicts within NATO, the uncertainty about the future direction of Russian foreign policy, the involvement of China, Iran, and Turkey in the region, and the activists of TNCs all underscore the following: the significant role of oil and gas resources in CEA, the potential for conflict for control of these resources, and the absence of an agreed upon policy framework for managing that competition. So, okay, at this time, the four nuclear-armed countries were Russia, China, Pakistan, and India. I still think that's about the same. Well, Iran's getting close. And maybe we did forget to put Israel in there. Okay. So further security risks concern the U.S. NATO involvement in numerous political and economic crises in post-Soviet CEA, the war on terrorism in Afghanistan, and the crisis in Iraq. All these conflicts have been closely connected to the activities of the single military world power with global reach capacity, the United States, and to the responses its activities provoke, in particular to its support for territorial expansion by settlers into Palestine lands enforced by nuclear-armed Israel. Okay, now we got the nuclear-armed Israel. Deepened U.S. presence in the CEA puts the Russian leadership in an awkward position of choosing to lean towards a divided and paralyzed Europe. To remain active at the world level by aligning itself with the U.S. that seems intent on destroying Russia as a world power by other means, or to unify strategically with rising China. Well, they aligned with China. Okay. So, okay, so this setup could easily lead to tensions among CEA rulers wanting to perpetuate authoritarian regimes and to gain outside support for themselves and their regional ambitions. There is no simple way to resolve all of these tensions peacefully or amicably. It is, hence, unlikely that we can expect true stability in CEA anytime soon, which, that ended up becoming true. So, let's continue. And when it comes to the extraction of Caspian oil and gas resources, it would be ideal if it were so that no one will win the game unless everyone wins, and that everyone is fully aware of this and acts accordingly. Okay. So, an alternative to the new great game, this ain't no game, would be for all outsiders to invest in the preservation of local stability, beginning with greater respect for local cultures, assisting in solving social problems, and overcoming the politics of stagnation without imposing a redeemer model from the outside. Both the US and EU have potential to strengthen economic prosperity, security, and politically stability amongst the post-Soviet CEA countries. If conflicts prevail over stability in CEA, this will have a great effect not only on the region's security but also on the global security as a whole. It seems for the medium term inevitable that energy policies in CEA and the Caspian region will embrace elements of both competition and cooperation. And look at when you look at look at that resource right there. Iran, China, and Russia, the emerging anti-US nexus. See, I've told you all the time, like, Iran, China, and Russia, I mean, it seems new to us because most Americans haven't really researched this, but Iran, China, and Russia have really been working together for a long time. Like, their coming up in power was not new, but in a way, the United States ended up directing it. And hello, everybody. So this has officially ended the research part of Brics. More importantly, because I need to move on to something else. But, um, um, but I am gonna do one more video. My next video is gonna be a reading on my chapter 1 novel that's coming out here soon. I'm thinking that's gonna happen somewhere between, August and September, it looks like. But I will be doing one more video after that where I kind of give my insight and I sum up the research that's been going on. But other than that, this has been an end to the Brics Research Jester production.